The story of John Kellogg, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and food pyramids can take us in all sorts of directions. Kellogg claimed that the benefits of a vegetarian diet were backed by scientific evidence, and the celebrity physician built a food empire on this theme. Meanwhile, his early allies, the Adventists, cited germ theory and claimed the moral high ground through Ellen G. White's divine inspiration for their promotion of vegetarianism. In this video, we take a look at the mysterious origins of these connected entities and the related concept of food pyramids for the population. There are plenty of red flags along the way, including the alignment with alleged dangerous germs, COVID shots, and globalist cult talking points. John Harvey Kellogg was born in Michigan in 1852, and over the course of his 91 years did a great deal of things, including founding the Kellogg's Food Company. He was a young boy at the time when his father, John Preston Kellogg, was instrumental in funding the formation of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The young Kellogg was subsequently taken under the wing of Ellen G. White and her husband, James White. As Wikipedia states, at age 12, John Harvey Kellogg was offered work by the Whites. He became one of their protégés, rising from errand boy to printer's devil, and eventually doing proofreading and editorial work. He helped to set articles for Health, or How to Live, and The Health Reformer, becoming familiar with Ellen G. White's theories of health, and beginning to follow recommendations, such as a vegetarian diet. In 1875, Kellogg completed his medical degree, and the following year became the director of what he named the Battle Creek Sanitarium. He remained the director of the facility until his death in 1943. Although Kellogg was disfellowshipped by the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1907, he kept his position at the world-renowned Battle Creek Sanitarium, and some of their famous patients included Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and John D. Rockefeller Jr. The complex that was built in the late 1800s looked like this, and a 2017 article on the PBS website reported that the Sands' luxurious lobby, richly adorned with thick Persian rugs, brightly lit crystal and brass chandeliers, and the finest walnut and oak furniture, was the size of a football field. Attached to this welcoming hall was a lush indoor palm garden with 20-foot banana trees, providing fresh fruit daily for its visitors. Throughout the facility were 5 acres of indestructible marble flooring, in which bragged the colourful advertising brochures, "Germs and vermin can never find a lodging." On that theme, according to Wikipedia, Kellogg was, quote, ahead of his time and an early proponent of the germ theory of disease. Indeed, in his 1879 publication, Diphtheria, Its Causes, Prevention and Proper Treatment, he states that it is a, quote, fact that many diseases are occasioned by malign attacks upon the vital domain by germs of various kind. Keep in mind, Kellogg wrote this 11 years before the publication of Koch's postulates. In any case, back to the PBS article, which reported that the complex had a massive power plant that provided the raw energy required for the sanitarium's insatiable central heating and cooling, refrigeration, cooking, maintenance, laundry, bathing, electric and lighting needs. In a separate but connected structure were 8 white-tiled indoor pools and hundreds of baths that would have made the ancient Romans jealous. How on earth the fledgling Adventist Church or John Kellogg built such a monumental and lavish facility in Battle Creek in those early days is an interesting question. From their reported grassroots origins, both went on to develop juggernaut industries, continuing to the present day, with Kellogg's turning over $13.1 billion in 2023, and the Adventist Church estimated to be worth $15.6 billion in 1998. In New Zealand and Australia, the Adventist Church owns Sanitarium, a large tax-exempt company that makes plant-based foods and soy milk. John Kellogg certainly had plenty of influential associates, and one would have to expect that some group bankrolled his ventures to get them started. There were clear aims to mould society to their ideals, which included minimising, if not excluding, the consumption of animal products. Additionally, Kellogg founded and was actively involved in other organisations that were promoting population control and eugenics. In his personal life, he was married, but reputedly maintained a separate bedroom from his wife until her death in 1920. They had no biological children, and on his death in 1943, Kellogg left his entire estate to the Race Betterment Foundation, his eugenics enterprise. The seventh-day recommendation of a vegetarian diet is fascinating from both a Christian and scientific perspective. Personally, I find it an incredible stretch to conclude that the scripture points us to a vegetarian diet. An article on the Conversation website in 2022 suggested that the evidence for such a practice derives from Genesis 1:29. And God said, "See, I have given you every herb that yields seed which is on the face of the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food." The Conversation article then explains how the Adventists interpret this to mean that God created plants, seeds, and fruits to be human food, and therefore human diet should be entirely plant-based. The insertion of the word entirely is clearly a non sequitur. Eating food sourced from plants does not preclude the consumption of animal products. If it was so, the Bible would state as much. In fact, the vegetarian notion can be shut down because Genesis 9:3 states that every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs. And Genesis 3, verses 3 to 5, gives us a clear message about how God ranks food offerings. It states, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord, and Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favour on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favour. The early books of the Bible contain specific instruction about which meats are for human consumption, prohibiting only some meat, such as pork. However, later on in Mark 7, verses 18 to 20, Jesus states, "Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them? For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out of the body. What comes out of a person is what defiles them." In other words, Christians were no longer prohibited from eating any particular food. Romans 14 sternly states, one person believes it is right to eat all kinds of food, but another who is weak believes it is right to eat only vegetables. However, tolerance of others is also implored, more on this later, but for all intents and purposes, here it remains very difficult to see how the Adventists concluded that the scripture points toward vegetarianism. Ellen G. White's issues with meat eating appear to relate more to her perception that it is a form of cruelty and a, quote, moral evil. She adamantly wrote that eating meat was harmful to health and even made the claim that it communicated disease to us through, quote, tuberculous and cancerous germs. Following this pseudo-scientific claim, she disingenuously cites Deuteronomy 14:8 and the instruction not to eat pork, as it is an unclean food. You can watch my video, What Does the Bible Say About Germs?, for an explanation of the concepts of clean and unclean and why the Bible does not support germ theory or contagion. In any case, White would have been well aware that just before Deuteronomy 14 verse 8, verses 4 to 6 state, "These are the animals you may eat. The ox, the sheep, the goat, the deer, the gazelle, the roe deer, the wild goat, the ibex, the antelope, and the mountain sheep. You may eat any animal that has a divided hoof and that chews the cud." It is clear that we have God's blessing when it comes to eating animal meat. Nevertheless, White wrote that meat was a health hazard and, quote, cancers, tumours, and all inflammatory diseases are largely caused by meat eating. Present-day Adventists have suggested that she was spot on in this regard and have cited the World Health Organization as an authority on this matter. Right, trust the science and make sure you are up to date with your COVID shots as well. Joking aside, the Adventist Church published a cringe-worthy piece promoting the COVID vaccines in December 2020. It is way beyond the scope of this video to address the amount of medical pseudoscience that this church promulgates, but you can search for the specific refutations of these topics on our website. Suffice to say here, the Adventist Church is a promoter of the WHO and other crony, quote, health authorities engaged in cheerleading for the medico-pharmaceutical industry. When it came to John Kellogg's rationale for a vegetarian diet, he also claimed to have science on his side and wrote several books on the subject. One of these was titled The Itinerary of a Breakfast, published in 1920. Like Ellen G. White's writing on health matters, there are huge non sequiturs and assumptions in Kellogg's work. He produced an almost comical system of what he claimed were food equivalents. For example, in the chapter Nuts May Save the Race, he states that 1 pound of walnuts is, quote, equal to 4 pounds of lean beef loin or 4.8 pounds of trout. There are no details provided for us to ascertain how such different foods could be declared to be equal, and the book is essentially unreferenced. He goes on to write, a single acre of nut trees will produce protein enough to feed 4 persons a year, and fat enough for twice that number of average persons. So 25 million acres of nut trees would more than supply the whole people of the United States with their 2 most expensive foodstuffs. Cereals and fresh vegetables, our cheapest foods, would be needed for the carbohydrate portion of the dietary. He continues, the trouble is the hogs and cattle are eating up our food supplies. We feed a steer 100 pounds of food and get back only 2.8 pounds. If we plant 10 pounds of corn, we get back 500 pounds. If we plant 1 walnut, we get back in 20 harvests a ton of choicest food. You can watch my video, Should You Eat Bugs?, where we analyse these sorts of agricultural claims and the ongoing war against meat. Given John Kellogg's other special interests, one could get the feeling that humanity and our domesticated animals are an inconvenient problem for the earth. This is of course a theme of the globalist cult and their grand plans to get the various equations tallying up correctly.
This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to 0, and that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to 0.
And now we get to the related subject of food pyramids, the purported guides to, quote, optimal eating. According to Wikipedia, the first food pyramid appeared in Sweden in 1974. In response to rising food prices, the retail chain Kooperativa Förbundet looked for a solution. They engaged the services of best-selling cookbook author Anna-Britt Engstedt, and she developed the first pyramids. The high carbohydrate, low animal fat concept was promoted as a way to save money and be healthy, and this formed the basis for the food pyramids that spread around many parts of the world. A recent Seventh-day Adventist food pyramid looks similar, although we see that animal products are not even depicted in the pictures. Low-fat dairy, quote, clean meat, and eggs are mentioned in the text, but it is recommended to avoid them or keep them to a minimum. John Kellogg may have wanted more prominence for his wonderful nuts, but otherwise he would probably give the thumbs up to the carbo-loading program. A red flag for me is the way the pyramids have been pushed around the world to displace traditional diets. On high carbohydrate diets, most populations have seen massive increases in obesity, and diabetes has become rampant in the 21st century. Corporate food entities have benefited, and more revenue has poured into the medico-pharmaceutical system. To be fair to some of the food pyramid creators, they did not recommend the refined carbohydrates, which now fill supermarket shelves and are heavily utilised by restaurant franchises. However, this is an inevitable outcome when it comes to compliance with government regulations, cost, and lowest common denominator end products laced with artificial preservatives. Keep in mind we live in a world where artificially flavoured and coloured products that are nutritionally deplete get the green light from most governments. On the other hand, the quote authorities issue warnings against or even ban the foods my family consumes, such as raw milk, unpasteurised dairy products, and home-killed animals, including organ meat. While the likes of Anna Britt Angsetter and others involved in population dietary advice and food pyramids may have had the best intentions, their work has been funded or co-opted by other entities. And as we have just seen, there are huge questions surrounding the backing of the Seventh-day Adventist Church and John Kellogg, even if they later publicly split. Disturbingly, many of the concepts such as germ theory, population control, and widespread vegetarianism are in tune with a globalist cult in many of the biggest corporate entities. On this matter, the original food pyramid idea dates back to the 19th century. In 1897, the Pillsbury Company produced this pyramidal image, which purportedly showed the, quote, nutritive values of various foods. Their associated brochures stated the chart, quote, shows clearly that Pillsbury's best comes next to a perfect composition, including everything necessary in the way of brain, bone, and muscle-forming ingredients, combined with great digestibility. Apparently because Pillsbury's flour contained the highest percentage of starch and sugar compared to the other foods, it was the clear winner. This was an overt marketing strategy and completely unscientific, something that needs to be kept in mind when looking at any of these inappropriately simplistic representations. Furthermore, such pyramids concern themselves with types of food, rather than the vital factor of the quality of the food, regardless of whether it is plant or animal sourced. Crops produced by industrial farming can be nutritionally deplete, and if they are refined, it gets even worse. As such, grains and flour from the modern era may be nothing like the times of old. You can watch my video, What You Need to Know About Folic Acid, to learn more about this depletion problem and why the so-called fortification of food does not fix it. When it comes to animal-sourced products, seafood can be contaminated by pollution, while dairy products can be ruined by intensive farming, pharmaceuticals, and processes such as pasteurization. So whatever your food choices, it is wise to know about its origins. One of the most divisive issues we encounter in our work is that of the mythical best diet. Over the years we have been called dangerous plant pushers because we eat fruit and vegetables, while simultaneously being called animal killers because we eat a lot of meat. Those participating in these activities appear to be distracted from the upstream issue of why they are engaging in these conflicts. A similar stage was set during the COVID era, where people argued about what we should do about a virus that did not exist. While this was happening, populations were fleeced by governments and their crony friends in a monumental transfer of wealth. So it is wise to keep your eye on the ball, and our solution has been to ignore the narratives being set. When it comes to food, we share our experiences of what works for our family and how we have achieved exceptional levels of health and well-being. For us, it had meant increasingly growing our own crops and raising our own animals. However, it has also involved purchasing fully organic foods produced by others and supporting local markets. At the end of the day, it depends on the actions of all of us. As Dr. Ulrich Williams said last century, when the people demand sensible feeding, the demand will be met. And for the good news, we'll conclude this video with Romans 14, verses 19 to 22. So let us try to do what makes peace and helps one another. Do not let the eating of food destroy the work of God. People are happy if they can do what they think is right, without feeling guilty. If you enjoyed this video, please visit supportdrsam.com